November of 1876, within Montana Territory's Bridger Mountains, Jacob Reinhardt commenced placing river stones between two log walls that fall, leading his neighbors to believe he had gone insane. Samuel Creek, whose family had constructed dwellings in these mountains for 2 generations, grumbled, "A waste of valuable lumber." William Thorpe, the most skilled builder in the settlement, chimed in, "Twice the effort for half the profit." However, Jacob, a German immigrant who had almost succumbed to freezing during his initial Montana winter in a typical single-wall cabin, had noticed something the local inhabitants failed to perceive. What insight did this resolute frontiersman possess regarding warmth that 2 generations of American pioneers had disregarded? The solution would not emerge from academic discussion or argument. Instead, it would be revealed by the most frigid winter the Bridger Range had experienced in 4 decades. This winter would transform Jacob's unconventional wall into the deciding factor between enduring and disaster. It would distinguish between enduring January nights with shivers and comfortably sleeping in shirt sleeves, while nearby residents exhausted their entire winter's wood supply by February. Prior to disclosing the precise method that maintained Jacob's cabin at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, while others found it difficult to keep theirs at 36 degrees Fahrenheit, please do me a kindness. Press the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment indicating your viewing location and the reason. For I will demonstrate the accurate dimensions, the specific positioning of stones, and the scientific principles behind its functionality. This is information that has remained hidden for more than 100 years. Furthermore, if you remain, you will comprehend why contemporary insulation businesses prefer you not to be aware of thermal mass building techniques. Let us now examine what Jacob constructed that November. Jacob Reinhardt was not merely constructing a dwelling, he was erecting a stronghold to combat the cold. And universally, people believed he was creating a testament to foolishness. Typical Montana cabins in 1876 employed a single-wall design. Logs were notched and piled, sealed with moss and mud, possibly with an interior layer of split planks if resources permitted. Warmth originated from a central hearth or a stove situated in a corner. However, heat also escaped through every crevice, each log's exterior, and every gust of wind that penetrated the ceiling. Samuel Creek's properly constructed cabin ceased retaining its fire's warmth within 2 hours after the embers faded. By morning, frost had developed on the interior of his windows. This was considered typical, such was existence on the frontier. Jacob's architectural plan was incomprehensible to them. He constructed an exterior wall of whole logs, tightly sealed, and then 18 inches further inside, he built an entire second wall using smaller logs. Within these walls, he commenced arranging river stones, not haphazardly, but in meticulous, tightly fitted layers, filling the entire 18-inch space from the base to the roof beam. "You are squandering 3 cords of excellent lumber on a senseless endeavor," Creek informed him in early November, observing Jacob's cement another course of granite and sandstone. "That stone will not ignite, nor will it provide warmth." William Thorpe, who had erected 27 cabins throughout Montana and Wyoming, stated more bluntly, "Dual walls retain dampness. You will encounter decay by spring and mildew by summer." I have witnessed individuals attempt ingenious concepts. Mountains do not favor ingenuity. They favor what has been demonstrated to work. Thorpe possessed trustworthiness. His constructed dwellings endured for many decades. His techniques were effective. What reason would anyone have to dispute them? Jacob offered no counter-arguments. He simply continued to pile stones. River granite was chosen for its compactness. Sandstone from the southern ridge was picked for its capacity to retain heat. Every stone was positioned to optimize contact with adjacent ones, thereby reducing air voids and forming an uninterrupted thermal mass. This structure reached from the ground up to 7 feet, precisely the elevation at which human bodies emit the greatest amount of heat during rest and routine tasks. By mid-November, Jacob's dwelling appeared preposterous. It was as robust as a fortress, with its interior dim due to the minimized window openings, essential for preserving the structural soundness of the walls. Its immense weight necessitated the construction of a foundation comprising stacked fieldstone, extending 4 feet deep to the bedrock. Thomas Brickner, transporting a hay wagon, chuckled, remarking, "That fellow's constructing a fortress just to shiver in." Yeah. The sound of mirth reverberated across the community. Jacob, the simpleton, Jacob, the German who failed to grasp the severity of American winters. So, Jacob would soon demonstrate his comprehension of thermal mass, a concept his neighbors had entirely overlooked. A typical log dwelling dissipates warmth at the identical pace it absorbs it. As a fire blazes, the air heats. When the fire extinguishes, the air cools. The timber logs themselves offer negligible contribution to retaining warmth. Pine and spruce, the main construction timbers in Montana Territory, possess thermal mass ratings of approximately 0.45 BTU per pound per degree Fahrenheit. A log wall measuring 12 inches could retain heat for about 20 minutes post-fire, after which it vanishes. Isomias. Stone behaves differently. Granite retains 0.19 BTU per pound per degree Fahrenheit, yet its density measures 165 pounds per cubic foot. In contrast to wood's 25 to 35 pounds, this implies that a single cubic foot of granite can store almost triple the overall thermal energy of an equivalent volume of wood. Sandstone with 0.22 BTU and 140 pounds per cubic foot proves even more effective for gradual heat discharge. Jacob had incorporated roughly 8,000 pounds of various stones into his walls. These walls, once warmed, would emit heat for a period of 6 to 8 hours after his fire ceased burning. However, the brilliance extended beyond merely the stone. It lay in the dual wall construction, which captured radiant heat between 2 layers of insulation. This configuration enabled the stone core to draw warmth from inside the cabin, simultaneously preventing its escape to the external atmosphere via the outer log wall. The 18-inch space was not random. It represented the ideal separation for convection currents to move heated air against the stone's face without generating cold air currents. Yet it was sufficiently narrow to maintain the outer wall's insulating capability. Creek and Thorpe did not conceptualize things this way. Their thinking was rooted in custom. They focused on what their ancestors constructed, what proved effective the previous winter, and what was common knowledge. When Jacob attempted to clarify that stone retains heat, that thermal mass functions as a warmth reservoir, they perceived it as absurdity. Stone doesn't recall anything. Creek stated, "A cold rock just sits there, and it will cool down your dwelling." Thorpe affirmed this with a nod. "For 3 decades, I've constructed cabins featuring stone fireplaces. If one isn't cautious, stone extracts heat from a room, essentially creating a heat sink around you." Their assertion held some truth. Unheated stone indeed draws warmth from the air until it achieves an equilibrium temperature, subsequently releasing that accumulated energy. However, the system necessitates sufficient thermal mass and a consistent heat supply to function properly. Jacob's 8,000 pounds of stone demanded 3 days of uninterrupted fire to become fully saturated with heat. His neighbors interpreted those 3 days as evidence of his incompetence, believing he was foolishly wasting wood. On November 28th, Brickner noted Jacob's chimney emitting smoke for the 72nd consecutive hour. He'll deplete his fuel supply before Christmas. Jacob remained silent. He continued splitting wood, arranging it compactly, and awaited winter's final judgment. December 18th, 1876. At daybreak, the temperature registered 14 degrees Fahrenheit, which was chilly yet tolerable. By midday, it had fallen to 8 degrees Fahrenheit. As dusk settled, the thermometer positioned outside the community's general store indicated 4 degrees Fahrenheit. Furthermore, the wind was intensifying. By December 21st, the Bridger Valley found itself gripped by a severe cold spell destined to be recalled for many generations. The morning temperature was 22 degrees Fahrenheit. The afternoon peak reached 16 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, the wind chill factor caused temperatures to plummet to a perceived minus 45 degrees Fahrenheit. This extreme cold was more than merely unpleasant. It posed a mortal danger. Farm animals perished from the cold within their shelters. Buckets of water solidified into ice within 60 minutes of being carried indoors throughout the settlement. Households consumed firewood at an alarming pace, striving to maintain temperatures in their dwellings above the freezing point. Samuel Creek's household depleted a cord of wood every day and a half. Despite being constructed to what Creek considered excellent standards, their dwelling found it difficult to keep the floor temperature at 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures might reach 50 degrees Fahrenheit closer to the ceiling, where the warmth dissipated ineffectively. Dressed in multiple wool layers, they slept clustered around the stove, rotating duties to stoke the flames throughout the darkness. By December 23rd, Creek's youngest child suffered frostbite on her feet within the cabin, as the floor temperature had fallen to 28 degrees Fahrenheit during the night when the fire's intensity diminished. William Thorpe's dwelling performed somewhat more effectively, thanks to a bigger firebox and more substantial insulation, sustaining temperatures between 42 and 45 degrees Fahrenheit during the most frigid evenings. However, his use of wood was ruinous. By the 4th of January, he had exhausted his intended winter wood reserves and was compelled to acquire additional cords from nearby residents at exorbitant costs. Prior to revealing the events within Jacob's cabin, please do me a kindness. Press the like button if you deem this content worthwhile, subscribe if you haven't yet, and share in the comments the lowest temperature you've ever encountered, as what I'm about to disclose challenges all conventional wisdom from contemporary building science regarding insulation. The data confirms this. On the evening of December 23, 1876, Jacob's dwelling sustained an internal temperature of 64 degrees Fahrenheit. This was in stark contrast to Creek's family, who trembled at 38 degrees Fahrenheit, and Thorpe's residents, who huddled together at 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Jacob remained seated, at ease in his shirt sleeves. The fire in his hearth had been extinguished for a period of 4 hours. Having been fully saturated with heat following 3 weeks of uninterrupted warming, the stone walls were now emitting their accumulated thermal energy at a pace of roughly 2 degrees Fahrenheit hourly. In the morning, upon Jacob rekindling his fire, the dwelling's temperature had decreased to 56 degrees Fahrenheit, yet it remained above freezing. It was still sufficiently warm to sleep without concern of developing hypothermia. The disparity in temperature was not merely 5 or 10 degrees. It registered 26 degrees warmer than Creek's residence and 32 degrees warmer than the external atmosphere. Furthermore, Jacob had utilized less than 50% of the firewood his neighbors used, as his sole requirement was to preserve the stone's warmth rather than perpetually reheating air that escaped through conventional single-wall structures. At daybreak on December 27th, Samuel Creek rapped on Jacob's door. As Jacob unlatched it, Creek perceived a rush of heat and gazed in astonishment. Those were the only words he uttered. Jacob refrained from boasting. Instead, he welcomed Creek indoors, presented the stone walls to him, and elucidated the concept of thermal mass with pedagogical patience. Creek made contact with the inner stone surface, which remained warm to the touch, at 7 o'clock in the morning. Even half a dozen hours after the flames had ceased, it retained its warmth. Jacob, speaking with his German-inflected English, stated, "It retains the heat and releases it gradually throughout the entire night." News traveled more rapidly than the frigid conditions. On New Year's Day, a dozen individuals had inspected Jacob's dwelling. Thorpe arrived, armed with a thermometer and a doubtful demeanor. At 9 in the morning, he recorded a temperature of 62 degrees Fahrenheit, despite no fire having been lit since the stroke of midnight. He then took readings of the external walls, finding the outer surface to be minus 18 degrees Fahrenheit. An 80-degree temperature differential existed across Jacob's dual wall and stone construction. Thorpe remained standing, thermometer clutched in his hand, and uttered 5 words that revolutionized frontier construction in Montana. My assessment was incorrect. This is effective. The factual evidence proved irrefutable. During January 1877, which was the chilliest month, Jacob consumed approximately 1.2 cords of wood weekly. Creek used 2.8 cords, and Thorpe used 2.4 cords. Jacob's timber usage was 57% less than Creek's and 50% less than Thorpe's, all while keeping an indoor temperature that was 22 to 28 degrees Fahrenheit warmer on average during the night when fires typically diminished. However, the real validation emerged from well-being and security. Creek's child recuperated from frostbite, yet the event continued to trouble him. That winter, 3 additional families within the community documented comparable cold-induced ailments, chilblains, slight frostbite, and serious sickness due to extended exposure to cold. Jacob's household encountered none of these issues. They enjoyed deep sleep and awoke feeling warm. They survived the harsh winter spanning 1876 to 1877. When March arrived and the frigid weather at last subsided, Jacob had received inquiries from 17 households. They sought precise details. What should be the thickness of the walls? Which kind of stone is most effective? What quantity of thermal mass is needed per square foot of the dwelling? Jacob openly disclosed all information. He drew illustrations detailing the 18-inch space, the method for layering stones, and the foundational needs to bear the load. He clarified that river stones were superior to quarried rocks due to their greater density. Furthermore, he stated that sandstone was more effective than granite for gradual heat emission and that the dual wall needed to be genuinely sealed. Otherwise, convection currents would dissipate the accumulated warmth. During the subsequent summer, work commenced on 9 new dwellings, integrating Jacob's thermal mass concept. William Thorpe, commendably, emerged as the most fervent proponent of this method. He improved upon Jacob's method, introducing enhancements such as deliberate air spaces at the upper part of the stone wall to manage convection, and using different stone varieties based on their elevation. He placed denser granite at the base for optimal heat retention and lighter sandstone higher up for faster heat dispersion. By 1880-40, 3 dwellings in the Bridger Valley area employed double-wall thermal mass construction. The architectural style extended into Wyoming, Idaho, and the Dakotas. The pioneers referred to them as Reinhardt walls, or, on occasion, German heat walls. Their construction demanded greater initial effort and resources. Indeed, their construction expense was possibly 30% higher, yet they halved the amount of firewood needed. They sustained temperatures 20 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit warmer during sudden cold spells, and crucially, they preserved lives during the recurring Arctic air masses that descended from Canada. Jacob Reinhardt passed away in 1903 at the age of 71, having continued to reside in the dwelling he constructed in 1876. That particular cabin remains standing presently, partly conserved. This serves as evidence of building concepts that contemporary construction science has re-identified and termed passive solar thermal mass design. What Jacob instinctively grasped, and what his community members initially disregarded as absurdity, was that combating winter's chill isn't about producing additional warmth. Instead, it involves accumulating heat, impeding its dissipation, and releasing it precisely when it's most required. The stone barriers he erected were not rudimentary. Rather, they functioned as advanced thermal accumulators based on concepts currently instructed in engineering academies. These include specific heat capacity, thermal conduction, radiant heat transmission, and convective balance. The unfortunate aspect is that this expertise almost vanished by the 1920s. Inexpensive timber and contemporary insulation rendered double-wall thermal mass building methods seemingly outdated. Why transport 8,000 pounds of rock when fiberglass bats can be easily installed? The response naturally is that while fiberglass insulation impedes heat escape, it does not retain any warmth. Contemporary residences warm up rapidly and cool down swiftly. Jacob's dwelling warmed gradually and cooled gradually. In a survival scenario, a gradual cooling rate can be the deciding factor between life and death. Contemporary tests conducted on recreated Reinhardt-style walls reveal a thermal retention capacity of 6 to 9 hours, with heat dissipating at 2 degrees Fahrenheit per hour, precisely corroborating Jacob's 1876 findings. Contemporary residences that incorporate similar thermal mass principles achieve a reduction in heating expenditures of 40 to 60% when compared to standard stick frame construction. The underlying physical laws are unchanged, and the inherent wisdom persists. The sole alteration lies in our readiness to absorb lessons from bygone eras. Jacob's neighbors labeled him eccentric until the harsh winter conditions unequivocally demonstrated his brilliance. His innovative methods were initially dismissed as an unfamiliar lack of understanding until their own children experienced the cold, while his family remained comfortably warm. The insight gained isn't solely about constructing dwellings, it underscores the necessity of humility when confronting traditional knowledge. It entails acknowledging that time-tested approaches frequently endure because they effectively resolve actual challenges, and it critiques the presumption that contemporary methodologies are inherently superior. Jacob, for his part, never asserted that he had originated thermal mass construction. Analogous principles are observable in Korean ondol heating, Japanese irori systems, and European masonry stoves. Jacob's achievement lay in adapting ancient knowledge to the exigencies of frontier life, conclusively proving through severe winter trials that stone walls could be life-saving in the Montana wilderness. Should you have found this in-depth exploration of frontier engineering insightful, please consider giving this video a thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button. Feel free to leave a comment below, letting me know what other intriguing historical building techniques you'd like me to delve into. Russian stoves, sod houses, and subterranean dugouts are just a few examples. I have scores of these accounts prepared and eager to be shared. Each narrative is replete with practical insights that contemporary construction methods have seemingly overlooked. The crucial question is, are you prepared to absorb the wisdom that the old-timers once held? Because in our upcoming segment, we will be exploring how a Norwegian immigrant engineered a chimney that was widely considered unfeasible, only for it to ultimately surpass the performance of every masonry expert throughout Colorado. Make sure you don't miss out. Yet,